Hello, today we're going to talk about digital photography. The objective of this lesson is to get a basic understanding of digital photography so you can capture a meaningful photo you're proud of when you have a certain project to do. Let's say in science class you have to do a project on an insect and you're required to go capture a picture of the insect that you would like to do a report on. And so you head outside and you want to capture a great picture, but you're not 100% sure how. And so that's what we're going to do today. So you can have something that you're proud of and it's meaningful to you. So let's say you find a caterpillar outside and you want to capture the vibrant, amazing colors, but not have all of the background. Those are the things that we're going to cover today, is how can you capture a picture that you want. Okay, let's start out with the basic camera. The camera that I will have in my classroom is a Canon Rebel. The basic tools that you're going to need to know is not only how to turn it on and off. Here's the on and off switch. These are the different settings that we will cover. I'm not going to cover them in this video because I really want to talk about what it is that makes a picture crisp and clear, or more fuzzy if that's what you choose. So we're going to talk about three elements of a picture. One is the ISO, which you would click this button here, the ISO button, and up on the screen you'll be able to change the ISO you'll be able to decrease the ISO clicking this button, and you'll be able to increase the ISO clicking this button. Okay. This picture had. Okay, so then we have the f-stop, which is the aperture. The aperture is the hole or size of your lens. The bigger the hole, the more depth of focus you have. The smaller the hole, the less depth of focus that you have. And I'm going to show you a picture. This is what, when I'm talking about aperture, you have a hole, obviously, that is very large. A lot of light gets let in, but your depth of focus, you'll have more of it. You'll have actually more depth of focus, and then you have a smaller. You have less depth of focus, and we will talk about that here in a moment. And then you have the shutter speed. This shutter speed shows 1/125th of a second, so that's a pretty fast shutter speed. This will allow, the shutter speed allows how long basically it's how long your shutter is open. Okay. So, what controls exposure? And we're going to go through this. I read this. If you want the URL, it is up here if you would like to learn more than what I'm going to give you today. But you have the ISO, and that is the rate. ISO ratings determine the image sensor's sensitivity to light. Each value of the rating represents the stop of the light, and each incremental ISO number, up or down, represents a doubling or halving of the sensor's sensitivity to light. Now you have aperture. Aperture controls the lens diaphragm, which controls the amount of light traveling through the lens. And I showed you, the larger the hole or the smaller the hole. The aperture setting is indicated by the F number, whereas each F number represents the stop of light. Then we have shutter speed, which indicates the speed at which the curtain opens, then closes, and each shutter speed value also represents the stop of light. The shutter speed is measured in fractions of second. Okay, when these three elements are combined, they represent a given exposure value, or EV, for a given setting. Any change in any one of the three elements will have a measurable specific impact on how the remaining two elements react to the exposed film or frame or image sensor, and how the image ultimately looks. For example, if you increase the f-stop, you decrease the size of the lens, The diaphragm thus reduces the amount of light hitting the image sensor, but also increases the depth of field in the final image. And then it goes on to talk about the shutter speed and how to capture motion. So obviously the faster the shutter speed, the more motion you can capture and capture it clearly. And then we have down here, the increase in ISO allows for shooting in lower light situations. But you increase the amount of digital noise inherent in the photo. It is impossible to make an independent change in one of the elements and not obtain the opposite effect in how other elements affect the image, and ultimately change the EV or the exposure value. So all three of them, you kind of need to understand all three of them because they do ultimately all work together. And here is a picture of an ISO at 100 and ISO at 3200. And you notice the higher ISO, especially in dark light, you have a cleaner image at ISO 100 and you have a noisy image. As you can tell, you can see all the noise in there at 3200. So this would definitely be something you would not want to do at night, is have a high ISO. I'll go through this. The ISO is actually an acronym which stands for International Standard Organization. The ISO rating, which ranges in the value from 25 to 3200 or beyond, indicates a specific light sensitivity. The lower the ISO rating, the less sensitive the image sensor is, and therefore the smoother the image, because there is less digital noise in the image. So I really like that definition. It explains why you have a cleaner, smoother image versus a noisy image, which is not very visually pleasing. Okay, then we'll get into the three elements that I would like to talk about. We have aperture. I like this picture because it shows when you have an aperture f2, notice the background is fuzzy, and this also means that the lens opening is big. When you have a small aperture, f7, the hole is smaller and you capture a greater depth. You capture the field depth. And there, lens aperture is the opening in the diaphragm that determines the amount of focused light passing through the lens. At a small f-stop, say f2, a tremendous amount of light passes through, even at a fraction of a second. But at f22, the diaphragm is perhaps at its smallest. Only a tiny amount of light is let in, even at longer shutter speeds. An interesting thing about aperture is that the F number is it doesn't matter the focal length of the lens as long as the F number is held at a constant. This is because the arithmetical equation that determines the F number indicates the same amount of light passes through the lens on a 35 millimeter lens as a 100 millimeter lens with a shutter speed of 125 bits per second. The size of the diaphragm is unquestionably different, but the amount of light passing through is the same. Then we have shutter speed. I think this is a great picture also. Notice a shutter speed at 120th bits per second. You capture a great picture, very clear, crisp, but a very slow shutter speed. That's 4 second, a 4-second shutter speed. You get a totally different image, and it's still amazing. Here's another example of shutter speed that I really liked to show because the pinwheel is spinning, so you'd have an extremely high shutter speed here and obviously very low shutter speed here, but depending on what kind of image you want to capture, I just thought that was a really good effect of different shutter speeds. Okay, so to kind of narrow everything down, I have these cheat sheets that are fantastic when you go into when you're going to go take a picture and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, it's during the day, and what kind of setting do I need to capture a good picture during the day? So you can look at this cheat sheet. You see more light. You look at the ISO and it says you're going to have a noisier, lower quality picture. You're going to look at your aperture. You're going to have a shallow depth of field here. Or if you want to have a higher aperture or a greater depth, you're going to have a deeper field of depth. So and also with shutter speed, you're going to have a faster shutter, less motion blur. I thought that was just a really good overall cheat sheet. The next one is the one that I really like because it shows what's going to happen. So you have a low ISO, and as you go higher, you notice that there's more noise in the picture. Aperture, same thing. The higher the aperture, you notice it's a crisper picture. As you go down in aperture, you notice the field of focus is less. And then it shows, I think this is just a great example of shutter speed as well. The faster the shutter speed, the more clear the picture. The slower the shutter speed in a moving object, obviously, is going to be blurred. We talked about ISO. This is a great visual to notice that a lower ISO, you're going to get a more crisp, clear picture versus a higher ISO. As you can tell, you get more noise. Another cheat sheet basically shows what's happening. Only the subject is in focus versus in focus, near and far. It shows what's happening to the hole in your lens. So I just thought this was a really great visual. The bigger the number, the smaller the opening. Then we come down here. We're talking about shutter speed here. I think this is a great example. The easier it's easier handled. So basically what that's saying is the greater your shutter speed, you can capture a picture with more clarity without, because when you snap a picture, chances are you're going to move your camera a little bit. When you get down to the slower shutter speeds, it's probably good to use a tripod. And then you have a bigger number. The bigger the number, the more sensitive to light, the more noise you're going to have. That we've shown, I've shown pictures. This is something that I really like, is the shutter speed cheat sheet. So you can see if your camera actually has a shutter speed that fast, freezes really fast moving objects, but let's say you want to have a blur, like slow moving water, you want it to be blurred. It shows how to set your camera to get that blur. And then here is a great picture, a great example of a super high shutter speed. It really captures the water, captures the image out of the water. It's very crisp and clear. I thought this was a great example. I'll make this a little bit bigger, of the aperture. Notice the small aperture just captured the image. It's clear, but the background is fuzzy. And then the higher the aperture, the whole image is relatively clear. Same with the ISO. I thought this was a great picture. Your smaller ISO, you capture a crisp picture. The greater the ISO, you're going to get a more grainy, fuzzy picture. And that is a quick summary of digital photography. Happy picture taking!